Hey, it's Lee. Welcome to Business Problem Solved. Today, I want to introduce you to two new metrics. I'm saying the new, you might already be familiar with them, you might be capturing them, but probably not. Two metrics that I believe are the key to being more productive, the key to understanding the environment that your people are in, and a key to really driving this improvement thing forward. So, two metrics. I'll share what those metrics are very, very shortly. And I've had this conversation a few times with different businesses over the last couple of weeks. Everybody, you right now, the person that you can see, the person that with you, the person you last spoke to, everybody has thoughts. And a percentage of those thoughts we will verbalize. We will talk about. Some people will talk about in a productive way that then drives action. So imagine there's three phases here. There's the thought that's happening in the head. There's the whether we talk about it or not, and then whether those conversations create and drive actions. That process, I believe, we need to have a greater understanding of. I put a post on LinkedIn not so long ago, and it said we need to be like magicians and make the invisible visible. Now, this is one process I would definitely encourage you to start thinking about more and thinking of ways that you can make it more visible. So, thoughts in the head, conversations, and then action. That's the three steps. Now, the two measures that I think we need to start to understand more of is the length of time it takes from somebody having a thought to an action taking place via a conversation. Measure number one, the lead time or the length of time between the thought and an action. And we're doing what we can to reduce that time. And then the second one is increasing the number of thoughts that people have. So the two measures, increase the number of thoughts that people have, measure number one, and reduce the time from thought to action, measure number two. And if this is done in a positive way, because yes, sometimes our thoughts create negative actions, but if this is done in a way that is creating the right thoughts in people, then you're going to create more positive actions towards the goal or destination that you're trying to achieve. Okay, so let's think about this in a little bit more depth, actually, because when we're talking about creation of thoughts, I've shared in the past about whole person leadership, whole person engagement, which is all about engaging the hands, the head, and the heart of our people. We engage the hands by giving them meaningful work to do. We engage the heart by getting people to buy into and understand and feel something for the business that we're working in, the direction that we're heading in, and ultimately the heart is engaged in delivering for us. Okay, they want to do that, or they want to do the best that they possibly can. So that's engaging the hands and engaging the heart. Engaging the head is engaging people in meaningful work, but as we know, the people closest to the work know most about it. So how can we engage their minds to extract some of that information, to get people to share and think about ways to do the work better than it currently happens now? So can we engage the hearts, the hands, and the heads of our people? This model that I'm talking about today, and the two metrics or the two measures, are about fundamentally understanding how well we are engaging the minds of our people. So how do we increase the number of thoughts that people have? This is a leadership task. A leadership task in asking better questions. If you ask the same questions that you've always asked, you're going to get similar types of answers. And typically, if you're not asking more the specific questions or better questions, you'll get people looking out of the window for blame or for suggestions and what other people can do. But the more specific and better the question that you can pose, the more that people will look in the mirror at themselves and understand what they can do to improve today's situation. So can you get people to look in the mirror a little bit more by asking them more specific or better questions about the impact and what they can do to move or forward, or to help you move forward, and to tap in to that knowledge that they've got about the processes that they work every single day? Can you get people to think more thoughts by asking them questions more frequently? Often organizations will have weekly meetings, monthly meetings. They might not even have meetings. But if you're not having structured conversations or opportunities for people to think new thoughts, because they're not being asked any new questions, then that is not going to increase or improve this metric about having more thoughts. So can you ask better questions? Can you create an environment that asks questions more frequently, or creates a space for people to have these thoughts? Can you provide more data rather than aggregated view? Can you get more specific and more granular with some of that information? Can you provide more prompts? Do you have the right, if we think about what Carl Clem spoke about and having process memory, is it easy for people to see what should be happening now and whether it is or isn't happening the way that it should be happening? Again, that's another visual prompt to stimulate thinking and for people to recognize whether what should be happening is happening. So measure number one is really all about, well, it is all about increasing the number of thoughts in our people's mind, in our team's mind. And this is for every layer of the organization as well, because every layer of an organization has a team. Often team managers don't see themselves as being part of a bigger team. Often those heads of don't see themselves being a part of a bigger team. So how can you engage the minds of every layer of the organization by getting them to think more about what it is that they're doing and what's preventing them, what's getting in the way of them successfully having an amazing day? What prevents people having a good day? What blockers are getting in the way? Where do you want to get to? Where are you now? And what is it that is preventing you from getting in that way? How can you get people to think about more of those things? How can you get people to have more thoughts? And how can you stimulate that thinking by having these conversations more frequent than you are doing today? So measure number one is increase the number of thoughts that people are having. Measure number two, reduce the length of time between thought, conversation, and action. So if people are having thoughts, how do you increase the number of conversations? Well, we spoke about that one just then. One of the things is by meeting more regularly, by leaders asking more questions more frequently. But the people will only share the thoughts that are in their head if they feel safe to do so. We spoke the other week about 4 words that people, or that we need to try to make people see as positive as opposed to negative: failure, challenge, problems, conflict. People have a fear of those things. And sometimes it's the verbalization of the thoughts in their head that prevent people, and the feelings that they get about those thoughts in their head, whether they're going to be challenged, whether there's going to be conflict that's created because of the thing that they're thinking and they don't want to say it out loud. So it's a fear of what might happen. And we need to create a safe environment that is encouraging of those 4 things, that make it safe for people so they don't fear speaking up. They don't fear speaking out. They don't fear talking about the things and the thoughts that they are having at that point in time. So firstly, increase the number of thoughts. Secondly, create an environment that allows conversations to take place in a safe place, so that people at work, people in your teams, don't wait till they go to the pub with their mate to talk about all the things wrong with their role. They don't go to the pub with their mate to whinge and complain about the colleagues, about leadership, about the new strategy or transformation or the change initiative. You want people to be open to having those conversations. And you do that by creating a safe environment where people are encouraged to share their thoughts, where every thought is seen as not negative, as failure, rejection, conflict, challenge, problems are seen as bad and negative, then people won't bring their ideas to the fore. They won't speak about them. It'll only be those really difficult and challenging people that ever speak up, or the same voice that ever speaks up. But you as a leader within every layer of the organization need to create an environment that encourages people to speak up. And you do that by asking more questions more frequently to get people to have more thoughts, but then creating the environment where they are encouraged to speak up, or creating more opportunities for those conversations to take place. Some people might be more comfortable doing it one-to-one. Some people might be more comfortable writing it down. Some people might be comfortable doing it in front of their peers. That is what you need to try to do to create more conversations, and then reduce the time from conversations to action taking place. So many meetings that I have the opportunity to observe where the next an action is spoken about and a month deadline for that action is given, when it's a really short action. It shouldn't take a month. They're giving a month for it because that's the next time the next meeting is going to take place, but the action might only be an hour or 2 hours. How can you create and reduce the time from the conversation taking place to the action happening? What can you do in that? In fact, actually, I was at a meeting yesterday and it was brilliant. The facilitator, they were developing a performance board, and the facilitator was introducing the concept of the performance board, introducing the concept of what they wanted to talk about, the problems that they're having in the current environment. And what they said is, okay, let's take a 5-minute break. And when we come back, rather than talk about it, let's design it together. So they'd reduced the length of time from the conversation to the action because they were just doing it rather than talking about doing it and then leaving it up to somebody to do and then report back within 4 weeks' time, is what often happens at these things. So how can you reduce the time from thought to conversation to action is measure number 2, reducing the time from the thoughts to the action. And measure number 1 was increasing the number of thoughts that people have. I genuinely believe if you can make these things more visible, and increasing the visibility of these invisible things might just be through these conversations, through the number of actions and outputs and productivity improvement or cost reduction or quality improvement or satisfaction improvement, because there's more initiatives ongoing, there's more action taking place. That is a visible sign that things and progress is happening. So the 2 metrics that I encourage you to think about a little bit more today are increase the number of thoughts in your people, and you do that by asking more questions more frequently, or providing more things that make people think or prompt whilst they are doing their work. Measure number 1. Measure number 2, reducing the time from those thoughts to a conversation and then to action happening. What can you do to reduce that time from thought to action via a conversation? And if you're doing that, if you're increasing the number of thoughts and reducing the time from thought to action, things will be improving. You're moving away from the big projects. You're moving away from firefighting because you're progressing towards an environment that's encouraging daily improvements or more frequent improvements. And if that's happening, then you are going to be improving. That's what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to just make you think about those 2 things. Consider in your teams now what you can do more, irrelevant of how well you're doing these 2 things now. What can you do more to increase more thoughts in your people? And what can you do more to create an environment that allows people to share these thoughts, but then reduces the time between the time that they've had them, the time that they've shared them, to an action taking place? Sometimes it might just be creating an environment that people feel comfortable to take action with the thoughts that they're having because the environment is allowing of that. Sometimes you might need to have this conversation and collaboration element of it in it as well. So yeah, so what can you do to increase the number of thoughts in your people, and what can you do to reduce the time from the thoughts to the conversation to the action happening? Don't just stick by your monthly meeting structure to facilitate the conversation before an action happens, because it might have been weeks since the first person had the thought about that thing. And what can you do then to reduce the time from that conversation to the action happening? More, if you get into a cycle of this and it happens more frequently, then more things will improve, and you will be making today better than yesterday and tomorrow better than today. Have yourselves an amazing, amazing week, and I look forward to chatting to you next.